Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. The big news for today is the government's announcement of the Agnipath scheme. This has been in the news since yesterday, ever since the Raksha Mantri came out in the press conference and announced the details of this particular scheme. In this video of the big news today, we will be discussing about the details of this particular scheme, the intention behind launching of the Agnipath scheme, and what exactly are the provisions and how would it impact the existing armed forces for the government of India. Now, as per this particular scheme, the government of India is looking to recruit about 45,000 to 50,000 soldiers every single year. The key point in this scheme, however, is that most of them will leave the service after 4 years. So it is a shorter form of the short service commission. So mostly people will be recruited for 4 years. After the end of the 4 years, one fourth of these people, that is 25% of them, will be allowed to continue in the armed forces for another 15 years in the form of something called the permanent commission, which happens even today. This will result in the number of people in the armed forces getting considerably leaner. India right now has one of the largest armed forces in the entire world. That also means that the Indian government has a big defense budget, a lot of which goes into the pension schemes for the defense forces personnel. The government of India has been trying hard over the past few years to reduce the size of our armed forces and also make sure that the government's bill towards the armed forces gets reduced. And this particular scheme seems to be a step in that direction. As I said, India has one of the largest active military forces in the entire world, coming just behind China. India has about 14.5 lakh active military personnel, which are required since India has a lot of active border rivalry at multiple borders in our country. Now, who exactly are the people who are eligible under this particular scheme? As in, who shall be recruited? Now, to understand, this particular scheme does not apply to officer ranks. It only applies to people who join the armed forces as non-commissioned personnel. So the officer ranks such as the major, captain, etc., those are not a part of this scheme. This is mainly for the Jawans, that is, the non-commissioned officers who join the forces. Under this scheme, people would be recruited from the age group of 17 and a half to 21 years of age, and the recruitment standard shall remain the same as we have for the armed forces. Meaning that most of the people who would actually leave the armed forces under this scheme will be maximum of 25 years because they will join at an age of 21 at max and they have to serve for 4 years. Or the person may also leave this scheme after working for the army for 4 years at the age of 21 and a half, depending upon when exactly does a person join the armed forces. Now these are the details that you need to understand. When you join the armed forces in this scheme, for the first year, you will get a salary of 30,000. Now, this 30,000 is not the entire amount that will be given in your hand. Out of the 30,000 salary, the person that is a Jawan will get 70% in hand, that is 21,000 will be given in hand. The remaining 30% of the salary, that is 9,000 rupees, will be invested in something called the Seva Nidhi package. Seva Nidhi package is kind of a corpus that the government will be creating for these people so that once they leave the armed forces after 4 years, they will get this corpus amount for themselves. The government of India will make a matching contribution. So, for example, every single month, 9,000 rupees from this Jawans will be contributed to the Seva Nidhi fund. The government of India will also contribute 9,000 rupees for this Jawan in this particular fund. The money that goes into this fund will earn interest, and that is why at the end of 4 years you can expect lump sum 11.71 lakhs as the Seva Nidhi package. It will be tax free and it will be given at the end of the 4 years. Basic pay will also increase year after year. In the second year, the basic pay will be 33,000, which includes a contribution to Seva Nidhi fund, then 36 and a half, and then 40,000 in the fourth year of the service under this scheme. Now, once the people are selected, they will undergo a 6-month training period, and the remaining 3.5 months will be spent in the service of the armed forces. As I said, the salary starts at 30,000 and it will go up to 40,000 at the end of the 4-year period, which also includes a 30% contribution to the Seva Nidhi program, which will be matched up by the Government of India. Also, do remember only 25% of the batch will be allowed to continue after 4 years to go on in the form of the permanent commission. Do remember this includes both males and female candidates, and the Government of India is not putting any distinction between male and female for recruitment under the Agnipath scheme. The Government of India has announced that the recruitment under the Agnipath scheme shall begin within 90 days and will bring all India, all class recruitment to the service. Now, this particular scheme, although it is applicable to all forms of the armed forces, it is especially significant for the army, which has a largest size amongst all. The expectation is that in the long run, it will help the army and the other parts of the armed forces become much leaner and much more efficient as compared to what we have right now. Now, the armed forces will benefit a lot from this scheme in the long run. Right now, the average age of the armed forces in India is about 32 years. It is expected that after this scheme comes into being, in the next 6 to 7 years, the average age of our armed forces shall reduce to 26 years, meaning that our armed forces will be much more youthful so that they can undertake much better and much more rigorous training and adopt newer technologies as they come up. It will also increase employment opportunities because these people of the armed forces, after spending 4 years in the armed forces, will be able to join other parts of the workforce for the Indian economy. In these 4 years, they will acquire a lot of various skills in their career of the armed forces, and then they can transition to some other field. Not just this, the government has said that they will also help rehabilitate these soldiers who leave the services after 4 years. A lot of them will be given some skill development programs, skill certificates, and bridge courses to make sure that they are ready to join the workforce either in the private or in the public sector in some other form. These are the main advantages that we aim to get through this particular initiative. It will be a unique opportunity for the youth to serve the country, but do remember the recruitment standards shall remain the same. It's not that the recruitment standards will be lowered for this particular scheme. The armed forces will be much more youthful since the average age will come down drastically. It will also be a good financial package for the Agniveers because apart from this particular money in hand, they will also be getting a considerable amount of life insurance and accidental cover under the Agnipath scheme. The scheme provides for a provision of rupees 48 lakh life insurance cover for the 4 years, and in case of death, rupees 1 crore will be given to the family members, and it will also include the pay for the unserved tenure. Do remember, after the end of the 4-year tenure, there will not be any pension or gratuity given to the person who has served under this particular scheme, because the entire aim of the Government of India is to cut down on the financial burden that the Government of India right now has. It will also give an opportunity to the Agniveers, that is the people recruited under this scheme, to have the best of training to develop amazing skill set with the help of the armed forces. It will also provide well-disciplined, skilled youth to the society which would have proper military training. This is everything that you needed to know about the Agnipath scheme. Thank you so much for watching the big news.